It's a great pleasure to be here. We're here to explore collaborative opportunities with the University of Waterloo. So I'm going to actually start out just giving you an overview of the Renewal Institute. So my talk is going to be less technical. Thomas is going to give you the real talk after I'm done on some technical aspects. And only because the abstract of his talk did not go into the announcement. I have it here in my second slide. And his talk is going to be titled Nanoscience, Resonant Energy and Sensors from Energy Conversion to Storage and Transmission. So let me start out and tell you a little bit about this institute called Renew. Before I do that, I thought I'll give you an introduction to just a brief overview of SUNY at Buffalo, where the Renew Institute resides. It is the largest and most comprehensive university in New York State, with about 30,000 students, 18% international enrollment. We've got alumni in many countries, about $380 million in annual research expenditures, and over $2 billion in annual economic impact. So the university created the Renew Institute, standing for Research and Education in Energy, Environment, and Water, as an interdisciplinary institute to take the university to the next level of research and impact. And the whole mandate was to engage faculty in 7 schools, which include the School of Architecture and Planning, College of Arts and Sciences, School of Engineering and Applied Sciences, the Law School, School of Management, School of Public Health and Health Professions, and the School of Medicine and Biomedical Sciences. And the idea was to do interdisciplinary work because the future research, interesting research, is at the interface of disciplines. So we've got a number of departments within these schools and colleges. We had about 200 faculty. The idea is to make a transformative impact in select areas of energy, environment, and water. So when you take energy, environment, water, you add food and poverty to it. Those are the 5 grand challenges of humanity. You can't do everything. So of course, we had to decide what is it that we would be doing. So we had a strategic planning exercise where we engaged about 200 faculty. And we formed a positioning for the institute based on the faculty we have at the university, their strengths, and the facilities that they have. And what we ended up with, before I do that, just to mention that the institute reports directly to the provost and the VPR. And we've got focus areas that I will talk to you about. And then we've got affiliated faculty members as well as Renew faculty. We have about 20 faculty slots as part of the institute. So the overarching mission for the institute is to advance energy, environment, and water sustainability as a foundation for what's called a regenerative economy. We've got 5 focus areas, quite diverse. The first is next generation materials and technologies for energy, environment, and water sustainability. The second is freshwater coastal ecosystems and the blue economy. The third is sustainable urban environments, environmental exposures, genomes, and health, and climate change and socio-economic impacts. And within the 3 pillars of energy, environment, and water, these are the areas that would be coming straight from the focus area positioning that we would be working on. In each of these focus areas, we have about 15 to 20 faculty, and we are adding 20 more faculty to fill in gaps of missing expertise within these focus areas. So let me tell you a little bit about each of these focus areas. For the WIN Institute, the relevant focus area may be the first one, and also perhaps the water. Well, actually, I could think of connections with each of these focus areas. And I'll tell you a little bit about each of these focus areas so you have an idea of what we are doing. So the first focus area, next generation materials and technologies, it has been motivated by the Materials Genome Initiative that came out of the White House when Obama was around. With the idea being to dial in materials properties for optimum product-based outcomes, to combine multiscale modeling, materials informatics, and experiment to create materials by design. So the reason why we formed this focus area at the university is that when we go from science departments to engineering departments at the university, we can go from the electronic scale to the atomic scale to the mesoscale, the macro scale to the device scale. We've got faculty in all of these areas where theory and modeling is important. We also have faculty in materials informatics or virtual high throughput calculations, as well as on the experimental side from directed combinatorial synthesis, characterization, and this slide was made for photovoltaics, so light management, making of devices, characterization of devices. So that's one component of this focus area. Another component of this focus area is to also talk about green products, to talk about design development of greener products, to consider the externality-related issues such as manufacture, extraction, transport, maintenance, end-of-life disposal, to talk about pollution of all kinds stemming from these operations, the health effects of people, the ecological effects, and the monetization of these effects to the process or the product. So going back to this one, when you look at the modeling capabilities, we can list faculty in various departments. We've got some gaps that we try to fill up, in this case between mesoscale and macroscale from a modeling perspective. And then from an experimental perspective, we've got a set of people, and we're adding more people as we move along. So just to give you an idea of some kind of the projects that we are working on, we've got a project funded by the Institute on rational design of next generation renewable energy materials, from photovoltaics to materials to device model. They're combining theory, modeling, and synthesis for developing earth-abundant chalcogenide semiconductors. A second is emerging light trapping strategies and new lead-free hybrid perovskite layers for clean energy. Another is atomic metal-rich carbon electrocatalysts for sustainable energy via CO2 reduction. And I'll say a few words about each of these also. Emerging ultra-wide bandgap semiconductors for clean energy and water. And this focuses on gallium oxide. Energy-efficient seawater desalination and food processing. And designing sustainability, integrating consumer behavior and product design to minimize electronic waste. So for the first one, so each of these projects to be designed or we would fund would have to be interdisciplinary by definition, combining, in this particular focus area, theory, modeling, and experimental validation. So you've got faculty from chemistry, chemical biological engineering, computational data science, electrical engineering, and physics coming together to work on these new chalcogenide perovskites and rational materials discovery. And so they're actually making good progress, looking at things like barium zirconium sulfide, right, with the right amount of dopants to come up with these materials, doing the characterization, and then fabricating them in device format. Another seed project that we have funded has to do with wide bandgap semiconductors for clean energy and water. Here, the interest is to develop a comprehensive understanding of this semiconductor to develop energy-efficient power electronics. So they're looking at p-type doping, etc. So they have already made significant progress. And I won't go through the details of each of these plots, but the idea again is to be able to do some theory and modeling to guide the experiment to make it to do experimental fabrication using rational design. And in this case, they are exploring magnesium doping in gallium oxide, for example. Here, this project had to do with light trapping in ultra-thin films. So can you reduce the thickness of the many kinds of semiconductor films for photovoltaics to really thin values, but use plasmonics to enhance very significantly the efficiency of the material, collaboration between electrical engineering, chemical and biological engineering, and chemistry. And again, work using rational design. Let me go to this slide here. So they've recently published a paper in Nature Photonics on this. And in this particular case, they implemented a nano cavity based plasmonic strategy on ultra-thin germanium films. Here's a widely different project. This has to do with making membranes, nanostructured membranes for seawater desalination and food processing. So the idea, of course, is to create membranes which have well-defined and organized nanopores to result in desalination. We recently funded a project on rational design of non-precious metal catalysts. So this, of course, is of great interest if you can come up with cheap catalysts. We had a project on offshore wind energy. These are floating wind turbines. And the reason why we had this project funded was because at the University at Buffalo, we've got an earthquake center, which is a unique capability. So you can actually mount a wind turbine on a shake table, and you could simulate a wave in turbulent water to study the stability of a wind turbine out far away, not near the coast, where nobody cares whether there's a wind turbine on the water or not. Of course, you have to worry about transporting the power back, and that's where Thomas comes in. And he'll talk about that. Besides rational design type projects, we are also working we are also interested in other unique technology areas. And Professor Thandat, who just joined us recently, brings some unique technology as well. And I'm just going to say very briefly about some of the things that he's going to talk in more detail about, is to integrate things like the network of sensors, IoT, et cetera, which could be used for many of these focus areas that I mentioned to you about, that we have part of the institute, and coupling fabrication of sensitive sensors with a unique way of charging them. And he's going to go into more details on this. He's got a quasi-wireless way of transmitting power, which can then power a whole range of sensors. So Thomas, you're going to be showing all these videos in your talk, right? So you're going to see videos of how this technology actually works, and it can be used to power automobiles, or it can be used to power sensors and bodies, etc., or homes, and you're going to hear more about this. So another functionality that we are developing, we already have a lot of this with faculty in various departments at the university, is green processing or solution processing. We've got a senior faculty hire who's going to be joining us, who is an expert in actually making devices, but focusing on green synthesis to enable wide range of nano devices. We also have expertise, in-house expertise right now to talk about, so many semiconductor materials and electronic materials are best made heteroepitaxially on single crystal substrates. Single crystal substrates are rigid, can only be made in small sizes. So you can have a paradigm shift in flexible electronics or in a whole range of semiconductor applications or electronic materials applications if you can create single crystal surfaces of arbitrary sizes and if they can be flexible. So we've got two technologies that we can use to make single crystal substrates of very large area and arbitrary sizes upon which we can put down a range of materials from ferroelectrics to multiferroics to semiconductors to superconductors. So for example, most of the world's high temperature superconducting wire being made all around the world is made using one of these methods to create mile-long flexible single crystal superconducting wires which have high performance. We have also created silicon, flexible silicon that can be put, single crystal silicon, which can be put on effectively what would be an aluminum foil that you use in the kitchen sink, but it is made in a way such that all the atoms are aligned, and then you grow heteroepitaxial layers leading to your device layer. Or you can make copper oxide-based semiconductors, or of course the 2D materials. When you talk about graphene, the Nobel Prize in graphene that was given, it was given mainly for a large part for the application impact that these materials could potentially have. But there again, if you're going to make an impact, you need large areas of single crystal-like 2D materials or graphene. And here's a case where you can actually go heteroepitaxial 2D materials on these materials, on these substrates, sorry. And the second thing is self-assembly. controlled growth of nanomaterials within device layers, which are grown on these substrates. And this is using what's called a process called phase separation and strain-driven self-assembly. So the same process that I mentioned, the substrates, can be used to make wide bandgap materials like gallium arsenide, also germanium. So you can talk about potentially to make the next generation solar cells. This is an MBE facility that this company, Tape Solar, is using to create substrates like this. And they end up having very nice properties. So you can take these substrates. You can also put controlled growth of nanostructures. And this is 1D nanostructures, which can grow heteropitaxially on a single crystal surface like this. Or you can talk about 3D configured nano fences, where you've got a nano fence bar going up, connected this way, and a whole bunch of these placed and connected again with segments, each one of which is now a single crystal. So it becomes a three-dimensional formatted surface. So that's one focus area of Renew. A second focus area has to do with freshwater coastal ecosystems and the blue economy. And here we form this particular focus area because we are residing where there is most of the world's fresh water. There are a lot of people living here. It is inherently multidisciplinary, and there are multiple stresses that one has to deal with. And this focus area focuses on freshwater quality and quantity. The interest is in hydrodynamic ecological modeling, human-natural system interactions, and effective management of water resources. An example of a project that we have funded in this focus area is microbial pollution in Lake Erie, using next-generation sequencing to examine microbial community interactions and their relationship to flow patterns. This is a collaboration of getting faculty from environmental engineering, geology, and biology together. And without going into too much details, they're looking at bacterial and what's called protist communities in the beach sand, surface water, and groundwater in a local beach using next-generation sequencing, and then talking about how this impacts local economies as well as health. We've got another project in this area which has to do with emerging contaminants in water. So when you look at a water treatment plant, the incoming water and the outgoing water from a water treatment plant, you find that the key impurities nowadays are pharmaceuticals in the water. And so how do you deal with that? So the next focus area that we have is sustainable urban environments. And in this focus area was, of course, motivated by the fact that US urban areas are responsible for 70% of energy use, 30% of greenhouse gas emissions, use 12% of water, have a significant waste generation, but also control a significant portion of the economy. And of course, the question is, how can you move towards climate change resilient cities? And so in particular, what we are doing in this focus area is we are focusing on green infrastructure and stormwater related issues. We are looking at climate resilient communities. We are developing this connection of big data with smart buildings for energy efficiency. And we are already doing some work on modeling of sustainable urban economies. So examples of some projects in this area include, here's a project which is a collaboration between civil and structural environmental engineering, Center for Computational Research, urban planning, and another civil environmental engineering faculty to look at integrated decision support for urban land use, green infrastructure, and stormwater management. The idea being to develop a state-of-the-art conceptual framework and computational tool for optimizing both stormwater management and green infrastructure planning, which can be then used in a much broader way. Another project is towards improving the sustainability of urban infrastructures and groundwater usage in growing cities, a collaboration between geology, architecture planning, and civil and environmental engineering. This is focusing on using a satellite-based technique, INSAR, interferometric synthetic aperture radar, to look at ground subsidence and relate that to flooding hazards. And they're focusing the work on 3 cities, one in Jakarta, Buffalo, and a city in Mexico. Here's another one. example of a project in this focus area. It's titled Modeling Ambient Air Pollution Using Optimal Sensor Placement and Multiscale Spatio-Temporal Data Fusion. So the idea here is how can we increase air quality data availability and resolution using what's called COMAC, Community Multiscale Air Quality Modeling System, and they're also developing low-cost air quality sensors. And this is a collaboration with geography, mechanical and aerospace engineering, computer science and engineering, and epidemiology and environmental health faculty. We've got another project here called titled Developing Thermal Extreme Indicators for Vulnerability Assessment and Climate Adaptation. And the goal of this project is to develop thermal extreme related vulnerability metrics that can form a basis for socially equitable urban resilience planning. So I know that maybe a lot of the people in the audience may have more of a materials background. Would that be correct? But I think, so even in the sustainable urban environment areas, we can talk about sensors that can go inside homes. So we can talk about a variety of ways that nanotechnologies can be used even in sustainable urban environments focus area. So let me skip this one. So the fourth focus area that we have as part of the institute is environmental exposures, genomes, and health. And we formed this particular focus area at the institute because at the University at Buffalo, we've got major investments in what's called a Center for BIG, and that has Buffalo Institute for Genomics. We've got a significant capital investment on genomic sequencing equipment. So we wanted to combine genomic sequencing data with actual measurement of environmental exposures and epidemiology to talk about health outcomes. So this particular focus area is looking at a lifetime of environmental stressors and genomes on health outcomes. So looking at ways to measure exposures, coming up with new biomarkers, looking at gene-environment interactions, and then talking about mitigating health effects. And in Buffalo, unfortunately, we have a laboratory there with the whole city, that is, of contamination. We had the Love Canal issue many years back, and very recently, we just got $10 million from a Tonawanda Coke plant as a settlement for research to look at air pollution. And that's, again, connected with this focus area. And of course, we are all familiar with the Peace Bridge and the amount of air traffic that goes through, the pollution that it creates. And this particular focus area is actually zooming in on pollution as an exposure, as a key interest. An example of a project here is traffic air pollution, genetic variation, and autism spectrum disorder, looking at how traffic air pollution and genetic susceptibility may speak to autism in kids. The last focus area that we have is climate change and socioeconomic impacts. And this particular focus area was motivated by the fact that at the university, we've got a great group of faculty who can do experimental measurements of ice sheet thickness in glaciers. And so that directly relates, ice sheet thickness in glaciers relates to sea level rise relates to climate change. So the interest is to combine model forecasting of climate change with communication of climate change and working with policymakers on how that one can come up with policy related to this. So as I mentioned, we've got faculty in ice sheet observation, ice sheet reconstruction, and climate change reconstruction. And we had a faculty gap in ice sheet modeling. So as part of the institute, we brought somebody who can come in and fill that need. And of course, if the sea level were to rise by a meter, you could have the future of Greenland ice sheet, for example, is shown here. From a modeling perspective, we know that Hurricane Sandy cost $65 billion, and a meter of sea level rise would cost quite a bit to the world economies. So an example of a project in this area is combining high-resolution air mass trajectory modeling and climate data to generate precipitation predictions that are useful for policymakers. The picture that you're looking at is what's called the Snowvember of December, I think it's November 2014. That's before I joined Buffalo. That's the actual lake effect snow coming down, which is, I think, a few feet and covered Buffalo for a long time. This is a collaboration between geology, engineering, computational center, law school, urban planning. And so, the question is, will storms like this be a norm in the future? That's what they're looking at by modeling, et cetera, and then talking to policymakers, law school, for example, and also how do you communicate these results to the policymakers so they can use these results effectively in making policy. So in all of these projects, and many of them anyway, we've got this question of doing interdisciplinary work, classic problem. So in this particular project, for example, the geologist comes and says, oxygen isotopes tell us that lake effect snow was strongest 7,000 years ago, and the climate modeler has no idea what that sentence meant, right? And then came the lawyer, and then he says, what are they talking about? So trying to understand the common language of different fields is a first step in each of these projects that I'm talking about, and that is really one of the big objectives of this institute, is to create this interdisciplinary work between people who don't normally collaborate. So let me skip this, and then of course we are developing interesting projects. So I'll just give you an example of some of the kind of work that we are doing to develop interdisciplinary projects. We have, as part of the institute, some really outstanding senior staff scientists who are all PhDs with 10 years experience. We've got with very unique positioning. We've got Susan Clark, who is our policy and planning specialist. We've got Mike Shelley, who is our environmental ecological economist, with 20 years work experience in this space. And we've got Zia Ahmed, who is a database and visualization scientist. So these people can come in with their real domain expertise and work with faculty or groups with faculty to provide that interdisciplinary positioning. Here's an example of a project we put together on multi-level ensemble modeling approach of predicting and simulating the effect of climate change and environmental change on human population dynamics, which talks about having an ensemble modeling approach to talk about climate change modeling first, then migration modeling, then population dynamics, economic modeling, and sociopolitical modeling. Here's another example. This is on water. This is a model for 21st century water, ensuring sustainability of increasing valuable resource. It is really based on developing what's called an ag water model. It's just, again, an ensemble modeling approach, which is a collaboration of many universities, as you can see here. We just put together a few months back a project on transdisciplinary research into detecting and controlling lead in drinking water. This again involves interdisciplinary faculty and a whole bunch of community stakeholders like Buffalo Water and the city of Buffalo, et cetera. How can we model how lead or other contaminants would come into the drinking water? What happens when you have to change the chemistry of the water? Which are the vulnerable areas where the water may be contaminated? And how would you address it? What are the economic considerations? And how do you communicate those results? So just one more example, a system dynamics approach to critical infrastructure resilience, prioritizing infrastructure services to support human needs. So these are all the kind of projects that we would like to put together. We're, of course, doing these projects in all the focus areas. These are just some examples that I gave you. We're also doing external engagement. So the Institute is engaged in implementing New York's 5-city energy plan. So New York has an energy plan to make the cities more renewable, right, and green. And so Buffalo is one of those cities. And so we've got 4 Renew fellows who are embedded in the city to help the city implement and realize these goals of the energy plan. We are also working with the Buffalo Sewer Authority and the Buffalo Water to make an impact in the water area. So in the energy plan area, for example, we're working with the LED street lighting, district energy feasibility study, doing work on trying to figure out where you could put solar panels in vacant lots in the city. And also working on green infrastructure projects, planning and implementation. We have a distinguished lecture series as part of the Institute to promote dialogue and interaction with UB's faculty, staff, students in the local communities with renowned leaders in science, technology, policy, in academia, industry, and government. So far, we've had some outstanding speakers. Peter Ive, cousin of Elon Musk, founder of Solar City, the largest solar plant in the world, high-efficiency solar plant in the world, which is out in Buffalo. John Fullerton, who is the CEO of the Capital Institute for Regenerative Economy, a lead thinker. Bill Ford, chairman of Ford Motor Company and grandson of Henry Ford, talking about how he recognizes that selling more cars is not the future and how he's moving towards sustainable practices. Mark Edwards, who was the hero of the Flint lead crisis. Jeremy Jacobs, the CEO of Delaware North, which is one of the largest hospitality companies in the world, talking about how he is taking his company towards sustainable practices. Then we had Mark Tursek, the CEO of Nature Conservancy, the largest nature conservancy company in the world, talking about sustainability. Yet-Ming Chang, who was the founder of A123 Systems, who started the battery revolution in the world. Michael Mann, the father of climate change. And we had recently had Linda Birnbaum, who is the director of the largest branch at NIH, talking about how global health is getting impacted by climate change. So we are also hiring faculty, as I mentioned, in each of these focus areas. We're always looking for good people. We are hiring faculty only which we call our T-shaped faculty, who have both the I, which is the deep depth in a certain area, but then the horizontal portion, which is the interdisciplinary piece, which cuts across the interdisciplinary positioning. I talked about the very unique staff positioning that we have, which can allow us to interact with a whole range of faculty in different areas. And I'm not going to go into the details here, but we have now about 13 faculty in each of these focus areas, filling gaps as well as new areas. And so we hope that these focus areas would then make a significant impact. And of course, the Institute is the faculty that comprise it. And with that, I can take a few questions, perhaps after Thomas finishes his talk. So,
we combine.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely.